$270 billion worth of cargo moves through this passage every year. It handles over 40% of all U.S. container traffic and about 5% of all global maritime trade. If you bought an iPhone, a large-screen TV, or a washer and dryer in the U.S. in the last decade, chances are these goods passed through the Panama Canal. France started building the canal in the 19th century. However, the U.S. completed the canal, spending over $15 billion of today's money and a decade of blood and sweat. More than 25,000 workers died of malaria, yellow fever, and accidents while building the canal under treacherous working conditions. Then, in 1970, President Jimmy Carter signed over ownership of the canal to Panama under the Panama Canal Treaty. Now Donald Trump wants it back. Trump says that Panama violated the treaty by allowing China to control the ports. Panama refuses to back down. Meanwhile, China is making moves to exert more control, while Mexico is taking advantage of the opportunity by building its own alternative canal. This is the Panama Canal, where the battle for control of the connection from the Atlantic to the Pacific is underway. The Panama Canal is a modern engineering marvel. It's a 51-mile waterway connecting the Pacific Ocean with the Atlantic. The shortcut significantly cuts travel time for ships moving between the two oceans. They can bypass the long and treacherous route around South America's southernmost tip through the Drake Passage or the Strait of Magellan. The canal is a shortcut that saves ships about a staggering 13,000 kilometers or 11,000 nautical miles. That has a tremendous consequence on global trade efficiency, fuel consumption, and overall shipping costs. The Panama Canal links over 144 routes to 1,700 ports across 160 countries. The canal generated about $3.3 billion in toll revenue between October 1st, 2022 and September 30th, 2023. The U.S. is the biggest user of the Panama Canal, making up about 66% of transits, while major beneficiaries like China, Japan, South Korea, Chile, Mexico, and European nations rely on it to cut shipping costs between Asia, the U.S. East Coast, and Europe. This key waterway drives global trade and links major markets across continents. Even though the Panama Canal's construction was completed in 1914, the idea of the canal dates back hundreds of years. In 1513, Spanish conquistador Vasco Núñez de Balboa was the first European to cross the Isthmus of Panama. He recognized the tremendous strategic potential of a water passage connecting the two oceans. Over the following centuries, European powers explored the possibility of building a canal across the narrow bridge between North and South America. However, technology and geographic difficulties were the main hindrances. As technology advanced, French entrepreneur Ferdinand de Lesseps, known for his successful completion of the Suez Canal, took the first major initiative in 1880 to build a canal in Panama. Engineers, however, underestimated the challenges. Excavation through rugged terrains, relentless tropical rain, and unstable soil was far more difficult than they anticipated. Soon, deadly diseases like yellow fever and malaria swept through the workforce, killing over 20,000 workers. Financial struggles and logical difficulties were the final nails on the project's coffin. During this time, Panama was under the control of Colombia when a bloody civil war broke out between 1899 and 1902. Sensing an opportunity, the U.S. chipped in. The Roosevelt administration supported Panama's bid for independence from Colombia. In exchange, the U.S. got a 10-mile-wide sovereign canal zone across Panama and the right to build a canal. In 1903, a canal treaty was signed between the U.S. and Panama, and the construction began the following year. However, when the U.S. took over in 1904, the canal wasn't mainly about trade. It was about strengthening America's military power. The canal gave the U.S. a faster way to move its navy between the Atlantic and Pacific. The U.S. spent almost $500 million, or roughly $15.2 billion, in today's money. Finally, the construction of the Panama Canal was completed in 1914, 401 years after the first Europeans crossed over the land. This was the most ambitious and extensive engineering project the United States had undertaken at the time. However, nothing lasts forever. In the following 2 decades, the canal paid tremendous economic benefits to the U.S. The passage was extensively used to supply oil and lumber to factories on the East Coast. However, by the 1940s, U.S. railroads switched to diesel engines, which made them faster and cheaper to transport goods across the country compared to the sea route. Also, America's experience in World War II proved that the canal was no longer as strategically important as it was once thought. Advances in air power, long-range bombers, and the construction of large aircraft meant the U.S. military's reliance on the canal started to diminish. However, the canal remained an important asset for global trade and military logistics. It served as the key route for transportation transporting supplies, equipment, and naval vessels, especially during the Korean and Vietnam Wars. In the Cold War years, debates over the canal's ownership grew over time. The U.S. and Panama's relationship weakened over disputes about the canal's control, the treatment of Panamanian workers, and whether both countries' flags should be flown in the canal zone. Moreover, it was Japan, a growing economic exporter, that benefited the most from this canal to ship inexpensive cars and electronics. Several U.S. presidents wrestled over the idea of transferring control of the canal to Panama as anti-U.S. sentiments started to grow. Moreover, the United States' possession of the Panama Canal was internally considered a form of U.S. imperialism. As tensions reached their peak in 1964, an anti-U.S. riot in Panama killed 20 Panamanians and 4 U.S. soldiers. As a result, Panama severed all diplomatic ties with the U.S. By the 1970s, it became clear that U.S. control over the Panama Canal was unsustainable. In 1977, President Jimmy Carter signed 2 treaties with Panama to transfer ownership and control of the canal. Donald Trump has claimed that the canal was essentially sold back to the Panamanians for just $1, though the agreement was not a financial transaction, but rather a diplomatic effort to ensure lasting peace. The first treaty, called the Neutrality Treaty, guaranteed that the canal would remain open and neutral for ships of all nations, even after Panama took full control. The second treaty, known as the Panama Canal Treaty, set the terms for a gradual transition. According to the Panama Canal Treaty, the U.S. maintained operational oversight until December 31st, 1999, when the canal ownership was completely transferred to Panama. Of course, Carter faced flack in the U.S. for handing over the canal to Panama. Despite opposition from different domestic quarters, the U.S. control over the canal officially ended on December 31st, 1999. However, the canal was awaiting new geopolitical tensions as the dragon was growing in its influence. Shortly after gaining full control over the canal, Panama conducted a massive expansion project starting in 2007. Expansion work was completed in 2016. Shipping volume quickly increased to choke the canal's capacity. After the expansion, more than 14,000 ships passed the canal every year. On the other side of the Pacific, China was rapidly growing as a new economic power to challenge the established economic order. Seeing an opportunity in Latin America, China strengthened its economic ties with Panama. It heavily invested in infrastructure and port operations near the Panama Canal. For instance, Hutchinson Ports, a subsidiary of Hong Kong-based conglomerate CK Hutchison Holdings, has been managing 2 ports on both ends of the canal since 1997. In 2016, China's Landbridge Group acquired Panama's largest port, Margarita Island, in a $900 million deal. In a major diplomatic move in 2017, Panama formally cut diplomatic ties with Taiwan in favor of Beijing. Also, in 2017, Panama became the first Latin American country to officially join China's Belt and Road Initiative. While China does not directly control the canal, it has been taking stealthy dragon moves to ramp up its strategic presence in the U.S. But would the U.S. simply stand by and do nothing? With the evidence of increased Chinese presence in Panama, concerns grew in the U.S. that Beijing was gaining too much influence in the region. As soon as Donald Trump was elected as the president for the second time, he vowed to take the Panama Canal back under U.S. control. In his inauguration speech, Trump mentioned Panama 6 times, more than any other nation. There is a growing sentiment in the U.S. that it needs to seize the canal back from the clutches of China. Trump argued that Panama has broken the Treaty of Neutrality by allowing Beijing to call the shots in a critical global trade route. He said, "Panama's promise to us has been broken. The purpose of our deal and the spirit of our treaty has been totally violated." He also described the 1977 treaty of handing over the canal to Panama as a foolish gift that should never have been made. "We gave it to Panama and we're taking it back," he declared in a triumphant voice. In addition to accusing Panama of allowing more Chinese influence, the U.S. has recently accused Panama of overcharging U.S. ships. However, Panama has denied all the allegations. Trump's allegations were met with angry responses from Panamanian President José Raúl Mulino. Upping the ante, he said in a statement, "The canal is and will remain Panama's, and its administration will continue to be under Panamanian control with respect to its permanent neutrality." He also added that the canal was not a concession from anyone, he continued. It was the result of generational struggles that culminated in 1999 as a result of the Torrijos-Carter Treaty, and since then, for 25 years, we have managed and expanded it with the responsibility to serve the world and its trade, including the United States. Meanwhile, China too has categorically denied claims that it controls the canal. Moreover, Panama has also denied the allegations of overcharging U.S. ships, which have been said to cost $1 million. for U.S. ships to cross through the canal. In recent years, the canal has been facing severe droughts, because of which the water level has dropped dramatically. These operations challenges have forced the canal authorities to restrict traffic and impose higher fees, which uniformly affects all countries, not only the U.S. Regardless of the reasons, the Panama Canal is becoming increasingly costlier because of the choking traffic, restrictions, and lower water levels. Toll rates have increased by about 20% to 30% on average from 2023 to 2025, depending on vessel type and tonnage. With all that in mind, it seems to be the right time to look for alternatives. Here enters Mexico in a boss move. As the Panama Canal is increasingly choked, Mexico's amphibious $7.5 billion interoceanic corridor stretching 188 miles can offer a potential alternative. The interoceanic corridor of the Isthmus of Tehuantepec is a rail-based trade route to transport cargo between the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. The cordon offers a potential alternative to ease shipping delays caused by bottlenecks at the Panama Canal. Instead of ships directly navigating through the corridor, cargo is unloaded on one coast, transported by train across the isthmus, and then reloaded onto ships on the other side. However, there are concerns about whether the rail infrastructure can handle large cargo volumes as effectively as the canal. Additionally, there needs to be major port upgrades for smooth loading and unloading operations, which raises questions about the project's long-term viability. For comparison, the Panama Canal handles over 8 million containers annually, while the interoceanic corridor aims to handle about 1.4 million containers annually. This means one thing: the strategic importance of the Panama Canal is not going away anytime soon. What we're witnessing is a complex chess game for control over one of the world's most crucial maritime choke points. The canal handles roughly 5% of world maritime commerce, making it vital for global trade and military mobility. The race to control the Panama Canal is more than just a trade war. It's a geopolitical power play between global superpowers with far-reaching consequences. The U.S. would like to maintain its dominance in the region. China, on the other hand, is likely to ramp up its ambitious Belt and Road Initiative by increasing its economic and strategic influence over global shipping lanes. For the U.S., control over the canal has always been about more than just trade. It has critical security implications for the country. A secure and reliable passage between the Atlantic and Pacific is essential for the U.S. Navy. However, growing Chinese investments and Panama's assertion of its sovereignty puts the U.S. in a strategic dilemma. President Trump has already signaled that he is willing to take some bold steps if need be. But what are going to be the concrete steps on the ground? How far is the U.S. willing to go to reclaim its foothold in one of the world's most critical waterways? How would Panama retaliate if the U.S. took strong measures? The U.S. military could simply blockade both entrances to the canal. How would Beijing respond to any U.S. adventurism? There are many unanswered questions. In a recent acquiescence to the U.S., Panama has agreed to kill a multi-million-dollar land bridge deal with China and stop charging U.S.-flagged military vessels from traversing the canal. But the most important question is, will the U.S. president want more concessions? Is American dominance over the canal truly over? We can only wait and watch as the situation unfolds. Will diplomacy prevail, or are we on the brink of a geopolitical showdown? Only time will tell.